reason I'm excited, and I hope we'll always be excited about our Messiah, is because I didn't come from a Pentecostal family. Maybe some of you are second or third generation. Maybe most of you are first. But I came from a very religious Hindu family. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, both on my maternal and paternal side, were Hindu chief priests. My great-grandfather and grandfather were chief priests of some of the largest temples where I was born in Malaysia, of the Indian descent. The Hindu religion, it is unthinkable if you are a daughter or granddaughter or if you have a lineage from centuries old of being in the priesthood of the Hindu religion, there is no way you can step into another religious system and let it be accepted. I was not allowed to worship any other way but through the Hindu system. I was hungry. I remember as a teenager, you know, if you're a girl child, if you're a female in the Brahmin family, you are not allowed to read the books. You're not allowed to read the sacred Hindu books, sacred to them. But I was so hungry even then. Anybody know what I'm talking about? That you want some answers and you're desperate and you don't know which way, but you want the answers and you will do anything to get it. Well, see, when I was a child, I was, in fact, a teenager, I would sneak into my grandfather. This is a mighty confession to you this morning, CCC. I would sneak into my grandfather's library and steal the sacred books to read it. Thank God there were English translations. And I would read it looking for an answer, looking for God. And then I'd be caught and I'd be punished. My grandfather was a slightly modern thinking man, not really, but he kind of loved me. I think that was as modern as he got. He loved me enough to say, don't do it again, because this time they will really beat you up. But he knew I was hungry. So he knew many times I snuck in and took those books and he'd close one eye. He would say, don't you see, you're a girl. You cannot read these holy books, were only for guys. Ladies, don't be mad at him. He lived in an era where he really believed what he believed. So did I. But I knew that there was something more. That it cannot be 3.3 million gods in a religion. I don't know how Hinduism has 3.3 million gods. Maybe they made them up as they go along. But the thing is that I knew that there was one. And that one knew me. I just didn't know how to prove it. So I thought, if I kept reading and if I kept looking and I kept asking, I said, Grandfather, why is it that in your prayers you keep talking about the one God that will come to earth in the form of flesh and die on a tree? You're Hindu. Why are you talking? Who is this one God? And he would shush me up. He would say, don't ask so many questions. So you see, this hunger just only grew. The more it was tried to be suppressed, the more I wanted to find out. And so I thought, you know what? I will just let this go for a while. I'll keep stealing. I'll keep sneaking in. I'll keep asking questions. Nobody seemed to know the answer. Somehow I suspected my grandfather did, but didn't want to talk about it. And so I grew up. A debilitating sickness took over my body. I'm not even sure what age it was, but it was gradual. I became very sick in my body. I graduated college and I started to work, but this sickness was so bad that I would just collapse for no reason. You see, since I was a baby, my parents, good people, they gave me everything I needed, but they were religious. And they dedicated me to these gods of Hinduism. So as a young child, I was controlled by forces that I had no control over. And so all I could think of is I needed to be healed, but I didn't know how. So I went to temples. There was a time, I think I was 18 and my father, no, maybe 17. My father took me to India to a temple. And it was a tall temple, Bishop, and it had a spiral staircase, and it seemed to go on forever. And I thought if I climbed that staircase, maybe I'd meet God on top. So my parents were in the foyer of this beautiful, ornate, traditional-looking temple with carvings all over, and I took off running. I could then. And I took off running on these steps to arrive at the top, and I just saw this huge area. It had an outer court, and then it had an inner place with a water and a candlestick, yes. Outer court, inner court, and then there was a big heavy veil. See, the enemy knows a good thing, he'd counterfeit it. He copies anything. So I look at the veil and I thought, that's where God must be. He's hiding from me. Well, the priest wasn't around. See, I knew the rules. When the priest was not around, you can possibly do some things, sort of get away with it. The priest was around, I just didn't see him. He probably was inside somewhere. So I opened this heavy veil aside. It was heavy. I had to push with it. And then I went in and there was this I don't know how many feet, this huge idol, many eyes, 4 or 5 heads, many arms. And it looked imposing and intimidating. And I thought, that's it. Surely God can heal me. Surely this thing here would heal me. I grabbed a hold of it and started begging. this God to heal my body. And I don't know where the priest came from. I knew he was around, probably hiding or whatever. And he suddenly came at me with his hands and his fist raised. And he said, how dare you defile this sacred place? Now you've touched this idol. How dare you defile it? Of course I defiled it. I couldn't even read the books, much less touch this God. Yes, I defiled it. To him, I took off running downstairs like the demons were after me, because I thought he was going to beat me or hit me, do something. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And he shouted after me and said, you are a sinner. You will never be able to touch God. There will always be a wall between you and God. Those words never left me. I said, well, I'm sunk for now. That's it. Do you know who you worship, CCC? Do you know this morning that no matter who you are, where you've come from, what you've done yesterday, last night, or last year, you have access. You have access. It doesn't matter. Yes, we sinners have an access. That veil was torn into two, and we are worshiping a touchable God. We can touch him. He can touch us. We can enter the throne of grace boldly, he said, in the time of need through the blood. But I didn't know that then. See, I could only hear the voice of this Hindu priest telling me, you're a sinner. You cannot touch God. You defile this place. So I ran all the way down those spiral steps, met my parents in the foyer, and they said, what happened to you? I said, nothing. Let's just go back to the hotel. Went back to the hotel and then flew back home the next day. My pilgrimage to search for God was over for now. My sickness was still in my body. And then I remembered that many years ago, people would come to my door and give me a tract, Jesus Saves. Well, who's that? I didn't know who Jesus was. And I certainly wasn't interested in another God. I had many already, thank you. 3.3 million plus Jesus? No thanks. And they're like, Jesus saves. And I'm like, well, thank you very much, but I've got my own religion. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, you do. And so, when the pain ravaged and it became so bad that me passing out and collapsing, the doctors thought they had a tumor in my brain. Some of them, and then they did CAT scans. They did all kinds of scans and testing. They couldn't find out why that this pain was just growing and debilitating, and there was no cure. That all they did was they gave me a bottle of painkillers. You know, if you take 4 a day, you might be able to manage it. I didn't want to manage it. I wanted to cure it. And so I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe if I took the whole bottle, I'll manage it real good. I'd die, and then, no life, no pain. When you're desperate, you think thoughts like that. When you're desperate and there's no answer and hope is just a dream or talk, you think things like that. So I was desperate. So probably on the last day of my life on this planet, or at least according to my plans, I was sitting in my room. It was late, probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. I had not taken any medication. I was just in so much pain. And then I remembered a tract, Jesus Saves. I also remembered a Christmas card that I once received. I don't know who would even send me a Christmas card. We didn't celebrate Christmas. But in that, again, it says, Jesus, Savior. I'm like, you know what? What have I got to lose? What have I got to lose? Nobody would know. They're not going to find out. I'll call him. See if he hears me. See if he even knows me. After all, priest said that I could never go through the veil. That I didn't have access. So nothing is going to happen in this empty room. The lights were switched off. It was time to go to bed. But I sat up, shaking in pain. And I cried out, Jesus! Nothing happened at first. I said, I'm Hindu. I worship many gods. Just in case he didn't know. I was introducing myself to him. Now it is. I didn't know he knew all things. I didn't know he enabled me to be conceived, that he knew me. Even when I was in my mother's womb, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know him. You do. You don't have an excuse. Don't even try to look for one anymore. You do. And so I tried again, Jesus! And in that darkened room, see that room, there wasn't street lights outside. It was built in such a way that there was a street out there, but no street lights. And so there was this light. It could not have come from a street light because there were no street lights outside that house that we lived in Malaysia. And a light just penetrated the room. I never saw a face, but there was a form that filled the entire room. A light and a voice. The first and only time that I've ever heard him audibly. Nowadays, it's in my spirit, and I thank God for that voice. But that day, when I cried out to him and told him I need healing in my body, that voice rang out in my room. I am Jesus. I am God. And the pain in my body that I had for many years, that I'd become accustomed to, was healed. In an instant, the pain was gone. Oh, come on, CCC, get excited. Get excited with me. For yourselves, for me, for those that need him, for those that need the Messiah. Can we shout to God? Shout to God. Oh, the pain left. The pain disappeared. The problems just started. My parents were still upstairs in the room. The next day was a Friday. Just any old day for you and I these days, but Friday for the Hindu is prayer day. So early the next morning, my mother knocks on my door. I'm still basking in this Jesus deal that I have no clue what just happened the night before. All I know is that I couldn't go back. He'd come to my life now. My pain was gone. I was a testimony. He had healed my pain. So what do I do? What do you do when you're faced with truth and then the other side of your life? What do you do? My mother knocked on the door, and I was still just so excited that Jesus had healed me. I opened the door. I'd forgotten it was Friday and a Hindu. I don't think I was Hindu after that. She knocked on the door, opened it. I said, yes, Mom. She said, what do you mean, yes, Mom? Why aren't you dressed? I'm like, for what? She looked at me like I lost my mind. She said, we're going to the temple. We're going to the temple. We're going to the temple to do prayers. You know, get dressed. And I grabbed her hand. I said, Mom, I can't go. She said, why not? You sick? Boy, that day I wish I had the flu or something. Something to blame on. Yes, I'm sick. Leave me alone. I couldn't lie. Don't know why. I looked at her and I said, I can't go to the temple, Mom, because Mom, I saw Jesus. And my mom really then looked at me like I lost my mind. She looked at me and she said, I don't know what you're talking about. Get dressed, get in the car. My mother was the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of chief priests. My dad came down and said, why aren't you ready? I said, I'm not going to the temple. I'm sorry. Forgive me, but I cannot go to the temple. So they left me alone. They just thought probably I was having one of those spells. I don't know what they thought, but they just thought that, because I was sick for a long, long time. They knew about my physical pain and physical sickness. And so they let it be and they went. My mother said, when I come back, we will talk. All I knew was to get a hold of that name that you know, that no matter how hard it gets, you can get a hold of that name. And I got a hold of that name and I said, Jesus, help me. I don't know what to say or what to do when they come back from the temple. They came back. My mother didn't come back alone. She came back with another priest. They were going to exorcise me probably. And so they came back with another priest, and my mom and my dad and this priest, they were just talking to me. And then somebody else drove up and there was another priest. Said some of these priests were my relatives. They were my uncles and cousins, but they were priests. They didn't talk to me as an uncle or a cousin. They talked to me as priests. They kept circling around me and talking to me and telling me that Jesus is false, that I had somehow been brainwashed by Christian friends. Yeah, I guess I was brainwashed, but it was not by a Christian friend. It was by a friend. One friend. Only friend I need, actually. And so I just told them, I said, I didn't say a lot because they were adults and I was a young girl and they were fierce and intimidating and they were very angry. And my father was standing in the corner crying because he was very close to me. My dad was my best friend. And I thought he would understand. I said, Dad, I have to follow Jesus. He was the only one I trusted I could say this. And he just shook his head in disappointment. That hurt me more than anything else. These priests didn't hurt me. My father's disappointment hurt me. He just shook his head and was disappointed. He said, why? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't care whether I ever know. I know I must. And so they surrounded me and they were just mocking Jesus and they were saying this is all false and he doesn't love you and you don't know and you're going to lose every inheritance. You're going to lose your lineage. You're going to lose the priesthood lineage. Do you know even who you are? Do you know who your great-grandparents are? Do you know what your history? You know what I'm talking about. Persecution doesn't just come by chopping off our heads. Persecution can come by family and friends and girlfriends and boyfriends just wanting not to have anything to do with you anymore if you just prayed. Nowadays, it's not, if you believe in Jesus, I chop your head off. Nowadays, if you believe in Jesus, you might lose your job. And so they were just unrelentingly trying to surround me and forcing me to do whatever and pushing me, telling me to recant, telling me to just come away from that belief, to say that Jesus did not exist. I would not. All I did was inwardly was clench my fist, and all I said was Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Sometimes if you don't know the words, that's all you need. Because the Spirit is in that name. The blood is in that name. All of His promises are in that name. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You don't have to be eloquent to get His attention. You've just got to be desperate to get His attention. You've just got to be in need to get His attention. Because He is magnetized. He's attracted to need. He's attracted to desperation.